Good afternoon, this is Sarah Sefton. These are my Unit 10 observations. My observations were conducted from my home in Steel Creek neighborhood north of Fairbanks. I conducted my observations from March 21st through March 25th, and all of my observations were done early in the morning between 6:30 and 6:50 a.m. The NWS data location that I used for my charts is the Fairbanks International Airport. That is the closest station to me. This is my worksheet for the final day of observations. As you can see, it has my maximum and minimum histories filled in down there at the bottom. Here is the air temperature comparison between my measurements and the measurements that the NWS reported for the same days. My maximum temperatures are quite a bit higher. This is because I'm up in the hills and we experience the inversion. So my temperatures are typically warmer in the winter, which would explain why all of my maximums are way up there above the NWS reported temperatures. On day 1, March 21st, I had a station temperature of negative 3.1 degrees Fahrenheit when I checked. The NWS reported a temperature at almost the same time at 06:53 of negative 18 degrees Fahrenheit. So about a 15-degree difference between my measurement and the measurement that the NWS reported at the same time. Like I said, this is fairly typical for this time of year. That's about the difference that I would generally see between a temperature down in Fairbanks and one up here where I live. On this day, the clouds were a cirrostratus formation. They were sort of a dome along the horizon with some faint streaks above them. Clouds were a little bit difficult to observe that early in the morning, but it did get lighter as the week went on, thankfully. The wind was about a 1 coming from the north. Every day I used my breath to determine both the direction and the strength of the wind. My maximum temperature, I did reset my thermometer the day before I began my observations. My maximum temperature for that period was 10.4 degrees Fahrenheit. My minimum was negative 3.1, which is what I observed at the time of my morning observation. This was typical throughout the week. I observed at a time where it was very close to the minimum for the 24-hour period. On day 2, March 22nd, I observed a temperature of negative 0.7 on one probe and negative 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit on the other probe. I'm not sure what caused this particular discrepancy because there was no sun up, which explained some of the discrepancies in my maximum recorded temperatures, but I can't quite explain what the difference was there in just under 1 degree Fahrenheit. The clouds were very similar to the day before. Cirrostratus formation, darker along the horizon, very low on the horizon, with a few more streaks just above. And the wind direction and speed was also the same, about a 1 coming from the north, again observed by looking at my breath. The NWS reported a temperature at the Fairbanks Airport of negative 20, about 19 degrees different, which is a pretty big discrepancy from what I recorded at the same time. My maximum recorded temperature for that 24-hour period was 19 degrees Fahrenheit, and my minimum temperature was negative 1.1 degrees Fahrenheit, which is close to what I observed. On day 3, March 23rd, I recorded a temperature of 1.9 or 1.3 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on which probe you asked. The clouds were again very similar. There were more clouds on this day than any other day observed, with the cirrostratus formation coming higher up into the sky and having more streaks away from the horizon and up into the sky. The wind this day was also quite a bit stronger. It was about a 2 or 3, again coming from the north. This time I could observe some smaller branches on the trees moving, and you could sort of hear the wind a little bit more coming through the trees and the branches scraping together. So that was how I observed the wind that day. My temperature was just above zero at 1.9 or 1.3. The NWS reported a temperature of negative 13 that day. Again, the inversion accounts for the large difference in temperatures. On the fourth day, March 24th, I recorded a temperature of negative 0.1 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 0.2 degrees Fahrenheit. I observed no clouds, and the wind had slowed down to about a 1 from the north, again observed through my breath. The NWS reported on that day a temperature of negative 18 degrees Fahrenheit, so about almost an 18-degree difference in temperatures. My maximum on that day was 15.6 degrees Fahrenheit, my minimum negative 1.2 degrees Fahrenheit. On my final day of observations, March 25th, I observed the temperature at 6.5 degrees Fahrenheit. This was my warmest observed temperature. There were no clouds in the sky again. The wind had picked up slightly, back up to that 2 or 3 with small branches scraping together, again coming from the north, the wind that day. The NWS reported a temperature of negative 17 on that day, which is a smaller difference, about 11-degree difference from what I reported. My maximum was 18.9, and my minimum, was 6.5 degrees, so quite a bit warmer than the preceding measurements. My pressure measurements have been a source of frustration for me. They do not line up, but on the third day, I did get a lot closer. I did not make adjustments, so I don't have an explanation for that, other than maybe it was cold and a little bit dark, and maybe I just misread my barometer the first 2 days. So my first 2 recordings were both around 1,083 millibars. And then dropped down to 1,015 and remained there for the rest of the week. As you can see, the National Weather Service had much lower pressure starting out. It did dip down slightly, and sort of my average, if you averaged their last 3 days, it ended up at about 1,015. But on the third day of observations, the 23rd of March, they had 1,013. The fourth day, 1,019, and then 1,012. On the first 2 days, they had 1,023 and 1,017. So again, I'm not really sure what the problem discrepancy is. Could have just been error on my part, but that's sort of been an ongoing issue for me. So continuing to struggle with the barometer. Here is the weather map for Tuesday, March 21st. I tried to mark Fairbanks' general location with a yellow star there. Tuesday, March 21st, you can see that there is a low pressure band coming up towards the Fairbanks area. This could have accounted maybe for the low, the bit of clouds that I did observe on that day. The following day, there was not a whole lot of cloud cover, which can be seen on the map here. And the pressure was sitting at about 1,017, according to the NWS measurements. The third day, Thursday, March 23rd, there's again a low pressure system pushing up. This was the cloudiest day that I observed, although it doesn't look exceptionally cloudy on the screenshot here. It was the cloudiest day that I personally observed, and it was also quite windy. So that front continuing to push north could have been the reason for that. Friday, March 24th, my 4th day of observations. Here you can see that there's some cloud cover on the yellow star. That's generally the Fairbanks area. I, at the time of my observation, did not see any cloud cover on this day, not even at the horizon as I had earlier in the week. So that may have just been the clouds sort of moving through, and that my observation was made before that cloud cover sort of moved through the area. Final day of observations, March 25th. Here is the weather for that day. Again, I saw no clouds on that day, which this time is reflected on the weather map. There's an occluded front far to the south and a high front up to the north. On this day, we experienced some wind and warming temperatures. Here are the maps, the weather map for March 23rd, and also the other images, the GOES images. I noted you can see on that day was the heaviest day of clouds, which can be seen in the visible and in the water vapor that there was some cloud cover. It was not heavy cloud cover from my observation, but it was the most that there was through that week in my observation. So using the persistence method, it was inaccurate from Monday to Thursday using the NWS, averaging the NWS temperatures, high and low. There was a change of 5.5 degrees in the average temperature from Monday to Thursday. So that was a fairly inaccurate method of predicting what the weather would be. Looking at the climate, it was inaccurate if you took an average of the high and low for the day, which would have put it at 15 degrees. The actual was 1.5 degrees, which was consistent with the low, according to the climate data for Fairbanks for the date of March 23rd. Looking at the 25th, again, averaging the temperatures was quite high at 16 degrees versus the actual average temperature of 2 degrees. This 2 degrees, however, was very consistent with the low for the climate information for Fairbanks, which was 2.6 degrees. So we are definitely on the low end. If you were predicting using a combination of persistence and climate, you could see that we are definitely on the low end of predicted temperatures using climate data, and that would maybe give a more accurate, if you predicted us at the low and staying persistent with the low, then that could provide a fairly accurate prediction of the weather. Thank you very much. That's it for this week.